this Mindmine Summit. As you know, this is a conference which is almost an unconference because barring the opening and the closing session, we do not encourage, actually we do not permit speeches or presentations, so no PowerPoints here. But we do like to engage in conversations, and to try and address a theme subject, we invite a plethora of experts from all walks of life to look at the main issue from different perspectives. And this year, the theme is about India. As I said in the morning, everybody in the world seems to feel that something is going on here, but they're not quite sure what is going on. So people are both inquisitive, wondering, some are asking questions, and some are saying, by the way, we've heard this many times. India seems to offer promise, but then it kind of slides down again and seems to get lost. Is it real this time? This is one of the questions being asked. We know that it's growing faster than the rest of the world economy. Is it sustainable? And will it actually address India's big challenge, which is removal of poverty and growth of the middle class of India, turning India into a part of the global network? Because we've remained somewhat protected and somewhat isolated in many areas. We did start about 30 years ago to open up gradually, and then a lot more in the early 90s. And then now with this big burst of change that is taking place, especially in putting the big building blocks for the long-term future in place. So these are some of the things which people sometimes realize, but that patience is not enough for people to say, I will wait 5, 10, 15 years to see the result. So they're also asking, what is going on here and now? So at this moment, we have Arvind, and Arvind in many ways managing the planning and advising the finance. So from your point of view where you sit, which of these questions do you think is a question we should be asking? Which of these questions do you think are irrelevant because there is real stuff going on? There's just not enough information out there to people both within India and outside about some of the stuff that are happening in terms of policy making. So we don't need to worry that the result is not here today, but it will be there because this is the way big policies are made. This is the way big changes take place. So first, to start with, your view on India's positioning in the global economic marketplace. Where do you think we are today, and where do you think we are going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yep. First of all, great to be here. Thanks for having me. I think that, we are at a somewhat interesting, perhaps slightly more grimmer times that the world economy has seen in the last 15, 20 years. We've just been in Washington for the spring meetings of the World Bank and the IMF. And there is a sense of anxiety about the world economy. Because if you look around the world, no matter where you look, there is some country or the other that's fairly vulnerable. China, people say it's going to pull through in the short run, but there are questions about the long run. If you look in Latin America, Brazil is looking, dicey. In the Middle East, the oil price decline, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries are also looking tricky. Russia is looking tricky, South Africa is looking tricky, the European Union, so many existential questions are being asked about that. Japan has been in a funk for many years. And so there was a sense that, only the United States and India are the two economies that in their own terms are kind of holding up. So I think that in that sense, I think it is a unique and an interesting moment where India stands well placed, relative to them. And part of it, of course, has been due to the fact that India is benefited from some of the global developments like oil price declines. But then there are other countries that have also done that, but they haven't done as well as we have. So I think we, the government, should also take some credit for the fact that, we've positioned ourselves well to take advantage of this opportunity. So that's the first point. I think we look relatively good. But I think the key question really is, can we continue, whatever we're doing, can we continue doing that for the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years? Because I think that's what, if we maintain the pace of growth and reforms that we're maintaining, then I think, all the things that we care about, poverty reduction, growing the middle class, engaging more in trade, becoming a real economy that matters, in the world. I think all those things are, I think I would say that somewhat the problem has been that people have posed, in a sense, I think, to go back to what you said, kind of the wrong question, which is that, will Big Bang reforms take place in India or not? And I think, so the expectations, I think, were set somewhat differently. But if you look around the world, I think that no country has done Big Bang reforms outside of a crisis. No country that's as big and diverse as India has really been able to do big. So I think if we maintain the steady pace of reforms that we're maintaining now, maybe accelerate it to some extent, I think we will see. And already you see lots of glimmers of good tidings. If you look at yesterday's Financial Times, I think we've displaced China as the biggest destination for foreign direct investment. So I think so lots of good things to build upon. I think our program for financial inclusion, I think is a really exciting thing, along with the whole what we call the JAM Trinity. So there are lots of exciting things happening. I mean, is it perfect? Is everything happening as people want it to be? Obviously not. But I think it's the trend and the pace that I think are important.
So from DAV Boys Senior Secondary School in Chennai to Stevens to Ahmedabad to Oxford on to Peterson Institute and now here, you had an interesting journey. And sometimes some of us think you're wired a little bit differently from many other people who have been in this position. And maybe that's why sometimes you seem to have a point of view which is a little bit independent from what the government is saying, what the fiscal/monetary systems are saying to each other. We saw some of that on the economic survey you turned out, and also in the statements that you made to the press and media on occasion about India's current policy making and how you think it should be, how you think it should be more transparent or more open. You also, I want to bring a second perspective here. You also wrote a book a while ago about Eclipse, living in China's shadow of China's.
Living in the shadow of China's economic dominance.
China's economy, yeah. More recently, you also talked of how China's economy has declined so rapidly. Are there lessons for us to be learned here as India? And how strong is the view that you have on going to the earlier part of my question, on what you have expressed as how you think policy should be made in India? Do you believe if we have the kind of policy making technique that you're talking about, that we are less likely to face a situation like China's? Do you think our current building blocks that you're putting, will this ensure more long-term and more sustainable growth?
So I think the contrast between India and China is very interesting, right? I think, remember, many of us who lament the slow pace of decision-making in India, we've all been very wistful about the Chinese model of decision-making, very centralized, authoritarian, you push one lever and down the chain, things get done. But Frank Fukuyama, who wrote The End of History, I mean, this is a mind session, so I hope I can pontificate a little bit. I mean, he said, it's the classic good emperor, bad emperor problem, situation. If you have a centralized system and have a good emperor, things go well. But if you have a bad emperor, then, things... So the contrast with India is now very interesting. I think maybe things don't move ahead as rapidly as we would like, but I think the big advantage is that we are protected from some of the, severe downsides that happen in many of these systems. So I think, some people have said that, I don't think that's true, but, the contrast they've drawn is that, India, it has the, the pace, it has the accelerator of a bullock cart and the brakes of a Rolls Royce, that's the way they characterize the Indian system. I think it's not like that, but I do think that the fact of having a democracy, having multiple seats of decision-making, power is dispersed generally, that there are inbuilt checks and balances that prevent, I think, some of the, really downsides of bad decisions that get made. So in that sense, I think that it's not even, I don't see, in these things, I don't even say, one can't even say, oh, I wish we were something else. I think we have the system that we have, which is wonderful. As you said earlier, vibrant democracy, people say what they want, freedoms to express ourselves, and it's what we have. You can't change it. And so what we have to do is, within this, can we get the best out of this system? And I think I see lots of signs where, in fact, that is happening. Just to give you one example, we have such a decentralized democracy that now we have this competition between states, which is imparting a lot of things. I also think that democracy itself has the potential in India to throw up solutions. I think more and more governments that perform well get rewarded, governments that don't perform well get penalized in the polls. And I think that's the best check and balance you can have in a democratic system.
So I said earlier, the monetary and fiscal policy have got more aligned than they were earlier, but there are also conflicts every now and then. You worked closely with Raghuram Rajan in both your earlier avatars at the IMF, so you know him well. And are you in agreement with him in terms of how the policy rates are being pegged right now? Because I've read statements from you and from the FM on 2 occasions asking for lower interest rates when they were not actually lowered by the RBI. Are you of the same view as the RBI governor on this in the short term?
Yeah,
and I'm talking about the short term because I know the long-term view is very similar.
This is a question that no chief economic advisor should answer. He does so at his own peril. I think that in the survey we expressed a view on how we saw, the outlook and what we thought, whether or not there was space for monetary easing. But I mean, the details of these decisions, when, how much, are all done by the governor. And I know RBI is independent. It's an institution whose independence we value. And I think while we can have, analytical differences, but I think finally, again, it's part of the system that we have of checks and balances in the system that we allow the RBI, the freedom to take its decisions. And then there are enough checks and balances in the system that eventually the right decisions get made over time. At least we have to believe in that, and I think I do.
Right. We've all been waiting for GST to get implemented now for many years in India. Do you think it's likely to happen in the near future right now? And how much do you think this delay is actually costing us as a nation?
See, I think that I'm hoping very much that it will get done soon. I think the finance minister has been very vocal about saying that he expects this to, and after all, he knows the political arithmetic much better than I do, and he's been very, open and forceful, saying we want to get this done quickly. I think that I don't know whether it's costing us, but I do think that implementing it will give us quickly a lot of benefits, no question about that. I wrote, along with my colleagues, a report late last year on the GST. And one of the surprising things I think I discovered was that, apart from the fact that, there are all these benefits from a VAT because, it reduces corruption because it leaves a paper trail, I think I hadn't realized how much we are fragmented as an economic market. And, so the line we had in that report was, if you want to make in India, you have to make one India.
Yep.
And I think the GST is going to push us in that direction to a considerable extent. And I think that's a huge benefit of the GST.
You raised an interesting point about the states getting competitive. Do you think there is any effective economic development model which will work better for states which were at some point in time called Bimaru states? If you look at especially the eastern states of Orissa, Bihar, Bengal, well, some of them have improved in terms of percentage, but the reality is the sizes of those economies relative to their sizes is still very small. And many of them are very richly, naturally endowed states.
See, I think, in my research, including with Raghu, if you look around the world, there are, that's what we call the natural resource curse. That countries that have too much natural resources like oil or coal actually end up worse off than if they had not had it. I think in India, we do have some manifestations of that. I think some of our resource-rich states, especially the coal-rich states, have been relatively less, advanced less because of having coal, because of having these resources. So I think that, at least for me as an international economist who studied, it's very interesting to look at these. I think that we have the curse of natural resources. I think we also have the curse of too much aid. Some states in India get too much aid from the center. So I think we need to think more creatively about how to address these problems. I think the Bimaru states are a bit different. I think UP and Madhya Pradesh are different from Bihar, Chhattisgarh, and this, because they're more resource rich. But I think now, look at Madhya Pradesh, for example. It's really one of the real success cases based on agriculture, based on better governance. And I think that that's a very good model for some of the states to adopt.
You're right. Madhya Pradesh showed like a 12% growth in agriculture.
Yeah, and agriculture for many years, yeah.
Yes,
and
yes.
Based on, agriculture. And I also, see, the one other thing I think, when I think about India as a common market, I think that one of the ways that I think the Bimaru states, including Bihar, will benefit and have benefited is actually by exporting their labor to other states. If India is a common market, I think that, we should have much more. Because remember, in China, this is an amazing statistic about China. On Chinese New Year's Day, I think something like 300 or 350 million people board the train to go back to their hometowns. That's the extent of labor mobility in China, and it's something that we should have, because opportunities get created in some states, and people should be able to move and take advantage of the opportunity. So I think that aspect, I think India as a common market is something that we really need to, in the economic survey, for example, we showed that in power, we're not one common market. In agriculture, we're not one common market. These are the things that we have to work at.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I also think there'll be other peripheral benefits which you don't really think about, because today the way people create warehouses or godowns depends on the tax rate in that state.
Exactly.
Not necessarily on where it makes sense from their logistics and movement of goods. So a lot of this, the streamlining of efficiency will be a very, very big fallout in addition to turning India into a common market. So since this is a conversation, I think it'll be useful to have a conversation with the audience as well.
Yeah.
So if anybody in the audience has a question, kindly raise your hand. We'll try and get a mic to you. Can we get a mic here, please? There's one coming to you. Yeah, there's one coming here first. Here. And since we only have 10 minutes, my request is not long speeches from anybody. Please, if there's a sentence, please put a question mark at the end of it.
Yes, sir. My name is Satyanarayana. I represent Ecom Express, providing logistics services to e-commerce companies. Sir, I think the third biggest revolution...
Can you keep the mic closer to you, please?
Yeah. The third biggest revolution what we saw after telecom and net, it is e-commerce industry. Okay, last 6 years, 6 to 7 years, it was thriving on its own, completely. Okay, now some rules have been defined. I believe there is ambiguity in terms of the rules, whatever defined. But somebody need to recognize that the industry providing, I think, attracted largest FDI into India in the recent times. Okay, not only e-commerce industry per se, but complete ecosystem, including logistics, generating huge employment, and plus also giving market access to not only consumers, but also to the SME segment across the country. Okay. Now, but the problems what industry facing today is in terms of distribution of end consumer goods, interstate distribution. Like every state is coming out with entry taxes. And state like Uttarakhand is 10% entry tax. And
Can you ask the question, please?
Yeah, I think somewhere maybe what government is doing in terms of really addressing this issue so that the industry can really
So I think when the GST comes into effect, there will be common taxation of services, including across states. So that should help very much address the problem that you're raising by creating a common market, eliminating big disparities in rules between states. I think, in fact, your example is a very good example of why we should have the GST quickly.
Thank you, sir.
There was a hand raised here and then here, please.
My name is Krishan Khanna. I run a think tank. We are 24 years old. My question is, the government has done a phenomenal job of locating 230 million Jan Dhan Yojana accounts in the last nearly 2 years now. But if you look at our direct taxes, they are very low, hardly 4% of India's population come into that, mostly salaried people. So the question is that our MSMEs, which are mostly proprietary and partnership companies, they have not been catalogued and located. And I think a lot of direct taxes can be garnered. So is there a political compulsion of not finding out where they are, who they are? Because there are probably about 80 million or 90 million MSMEs in the manufacturing and the service sector, because the agricultural MSMEs are out of the tax net in any case. So the question is, can this be done in the next 12 months? Because I'm sure the tax base can shoot up 2 to 3 times, and the tax rates then could come down also.
Yeah, I think the point that you're making, it's a point that we made in the economic survey, that we have very few, income taxpayers in India, and I think anything that can be done to, increase that number is very good for the long run for the country. Whether it should be MSME or individuals or partnerships, I think these are matters of detail. But I think the broad vision should be that, we get more people to pay taxes. But then I think what is important to realize is that, on the one hand, we need more people to pay taxes to feel that they're part of government. But I think also it's incumbent on the government to give the impression or to make people feel that it's worthwhile paying taxes. So there is a reciprocal obligation on the government as well, to use money well, to deliver services better. And that's what creates that virtuous dynamic of, then people are willing to pay taxes. Because, getting people to pay taxes is not just a matter of, sticks and penalties and so on. It's also a matter of, making people willingly volunteer to comply with taxes because they feel, they're part of this system.
Yeah, they need to see government services actually being provided in the manner they should, at the quality they should.
Exactly.
Service levels being with SLAs, etc. And also, I think the point you make is very valid, that taxation should be based on income rather than the activities which generates the income.
Yeah.
If you can kind of use that as a criteria, say anything over this income is justified to be taxed because that's enough for...
That's the phrase we use in the survey, actually, It should be defined in terms of how much rather than where you get your money from.
Can we get the mic here, please? Nikhil? Yeah.
My name is Nikhil Kochar. We've been hearing a lot of good things about the Indian economy on a global basis. Two basic points linked to a question. Point number one, what if the oil price had not declined so much and we did not have the advantage of that buffer? Point number two, we are still living in a country where the finance minister is also hoping for a good monsoon this year. So your comments.
I think, counterfactuals are kind of interesting from an academic perspective. The way I would have rephrased your question would have been, what if oil prices go up in the future? What will we do? I think that would be maybe, if you don't mind my rephrasing your question. I think the answer to that is that all the forecasts are that, even if oil prices go up now, we're in a very different dynamic in the oil market now compared to, say, 5 years ago. With the discovery of shale gas and shale oil, essentially now there is a kind of natural cap of oil prices between $55 and $60, because once it goes beyond that, shale gas and shale oil can come back into production, which will bring oil prices back. So, and at that level, 55 to 60, I think, even if oil prices go up, I think, of course, we'll have to adjust, but I don't think it'll be a serious problem. We have enough buffers to think. Your second point, I think, is a very good point. I think that it is true that, 70 years after independence, we still hope for a good monsoon. What I think it means is that we need to devote much more attention to agriculture and, the long-run problems of agriculture. I think we need to address much more, better water harvesting, better technology, more science, more R&D, whatever the pulses problem that we need to address, which we're going on a war footing. I think we need to take agriculture much more seriously, I think. And then, we will then no longer have to turn toward the skies to see how the economy will do.
You're absolutely right. Actually, many countries have pegged their next year's budgets at oil price of between $50 and $60, incidentally. And I think India is well positioned to handle that kind of oil price. Our economy currently will not move even a bit if the oil price goes up to between 50 and 60. I mean, will not move negatively. In fact, your ability of your current buyers of your exportable goods will go up. You will actually end up gaining. So that's a plus to oil prices going up to 50 or 60, and not beyond 60. Yes, please.
As someone who sells automotives, I think I'm surprised you say that.
It's a fact. It's a fact
good,
of life.
good. That's
It's
good.
a fact,
Yeah.
yeah. Can we get a mic here, please?
I'm Subir. I represent a company called Exide. I just wanted to know if there is any definite plan on labor market reforms.
You see, I think labor market reforms are a very good example of the kind of competitive federalism that we were talking about. You know that labor is on the concurrent list in the Constitution, so both the center and the states can reform labor laws. And I think what has happened is very much that, a few states have started, and I think that that pressure is going to lead to other states, Gujarat, first Rajasthan, I think Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat are also following suit. So that, I think, pressure, I think the center is also looking at some reforms. So it's a combination of some reforms at the center, plus, pressure put by some states, I think, to reform will happen. I think there's another pressure for reform that I think is going to happen in terms of labor laws. We discussed this in the economic survey. One of the heartening developments in India is, big companies with big employment potential are coming into India. And I think that, these companies will flourish or will say that they can flourish if there's more change in labor laws. And I think, that can also drive change in India. So, that's how it's going to happen.
So we have about 3 or 4 hands raised, but we have 1 minute to go. I thought it would be useful for us to hear from you what you think we should hear about the current state of the economy and where it's going.
As I said earlier, I think we're kind of headed in the right direction. I think, I'm like all of you hoping that the GST will get done very soon. I think if the GST is gets done, and with apologies, if the monsoon is good, we can, I think there are lots of good indicators. Car sales are up, construction is up, cement is up, FDI is up. If we can maintain this momentum, not get complacent, keep, chipping away, I think the states also have to participate in this. If you can get this, momentum going, both at the center and the states. And if the international economy doesn't turn too much against us, I think we're really, on the right path.
Well, on that happy note, thank you very much, Arvind, for being here with us. Thank you for being very open in this interactive session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would request you to kindly present a memento to Mr. Subramanian. Can we have a big round of applause for a very fabulous Mindmine Exchange?